line with this administration's position on ensuring that the most vulnerable are supported, the President has declared with immediate effect the following actions. 1, a state of emergency on food security. 2, that all matters pertaining to food and water availability and affordability as essential livelihood items be included within the purview of the National Security Council. Now, as a direct and immediate response to this crisis, a number of initiatives will be deployed in the coming weeks to reverse this inflationary trend and guarantee future uninterrupted supplies of affordable foods to ordinary Nigerians. We will immediately release fertilizers and grains to farmers and households to mitigate the effects of the subsidy removal. 2, there will be an urgent synergy between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Water Resources to ensure adequate irrigation of farmlands and to guarantee that food is produced all year round. We will establish ranches in collaboration with state governments, and the federal government will pay for the land.
Welcome back. Yes, indeed. So that we'll be talking about this morning. We're joined by Professor Christine Ikweme, who is of the Department of Food Science and Technology, University of Calabar. We also do have Mr. Rufus Idris, the Country Director, Heifer International. Good morning. Thank you for coming on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this particular policy, yes, people are also trying to internalize it to understand how it's all going to play out. Of course, we've heard how it's going to go on. But from your perspective, what kind of consideration are you giving to this? I mean, how do you see all of this policy playing out?
You mean the what policy?
The food security policy, this special emergency on food.
Yes. Declaring food security issue as an emergency issue is very welcome indeed, because right now we are in a state of emergency. We need that, issue to be addressed holistically. And so I welcome the fact that, it's now on the front burner and the government is trying to do something about it, but it's the modality that is the issue. So it's a welcome relief that, the government feels that there ought to be, a focus on the issue of food security in Nigeria, because people are really suffering.
What issue do you have? Why did you say the modality will be the issue?
Okay, so the modality is the plan, the strategy. What strategy do you hope to use to, mitigate the effects? Because if you have a wrong strategy, you've not achieved anything. That's what it is.
But are there any indication that there is a wrong strategy already?
Well, I'm not saying that there's a wrong strategy, because this is just unfolding, and we've heard what the government is proposing to do. Mm-hmm. But the issue is that the best of the options available? Is that the best of the options?
That's a big question for us, and then maybe that's why we want you to delve. Does this answer what it is that experts have been asking for to help bring down inflationary prices of food?
Well, given a household, the government said it's proposing 8,000. Mm-hmm. The simple question is, what would 8,000 do for a household? How much does it boil down to? And how many households will get it? You see, one thing is government having a policy. They could be very sincere, but they're sincerely wrong. And how many households at the end of the day will have that money? And how would that money, how far will it help in, solving their issues? That means it's like 300 naira a day. Mm-hmm. When you boil it, when you take it, the nitty-gritty is just like 300 naira a day. So what would 300 naira a day?
Okay, well, we'll still get your recommendations moving forward, because, having announced this, we like to believe that they want it to work. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll come back to you soon. But Mr. Yusuf, you being country director, you've been doing some job in this country. How does this announcement fit into what you have been working on in the country to ensure food security?
Thank you so much, Chamberlain. This is a very good initiative in the right direction. We've been in a serious state of emergency even before now. Inflation rate in Nigeria has been increasing year in, year out. And the biggest contributor to that inflation rate increase has been food inflation. So in 2021, for instance, food inflation at some point rose to like 23%. And at that time, the price of food as well jumped up to around 20%. That was hard on the common man out there on the street. As at March of this year, NBS gave the data that our current food inflation is around 24.45%. That's a huge amount of inflation rate to have for food in any country. And if you look at it as well, an average Nigerian today will spend about 56.4% of their income on food alone. That was even before the fuel subsidy removal. And the price of food has jumped up tremendously, more than 50%. So I think it's a welcome idea. It just shows that the government is now saying, yes, previous government has prioritized agriculture as where we need to do more to feed ourselves, produce what we can feed ourselves locally, and reduce how much we rely on importation of food, which is also one of the causes of why we have this interruption or disruption within the food system space. So I would say that what we've been doing in the past is just mainly trying to support smallholder farmers or farmers in Nigeria to grow what we eat. There's so much vacuum there. More than $22 billion spent on food importation on a yearly basis. Farmers are here that can do that can produce some level. Yes, we will still import, but how much of that chunk can we produce locally ourselves so we can have a control of it? And if we must produce locally as well, how do we also reduce the amount of wastages? So if you look at the mandate that government just made, they want to also increase a lot of infrastructure like storage system, cold storage, and likes that can reduce the post-harvest loss that we experience today and can let us have more available food on the table as well. We're one of the most under-mechanized country in the world when it comes to agriculture. Our farmers struggle to use hoe and cutlasses to harvest or to cultivate their land. We can't compete that way. So the policy has just said that they're going to invest more in mechanization. With a tractor alone going to a farm to support farmers, they can cultivate their land 40 times faster. 1 hectare of land that would take like 5 men cultivating for 5 days, and you're also still feeding them, a tractor can do that in just 1 hour, 1.5 hours. That saves them time to go to school, to attend to health services, and do other things that they're required to do within that period of time. And it's even lower in cost compared to the cost you will have paid for manual labor and still feeding them for that period of time. So I think there's some sense in it. And also, if you look at fertilizers, due to the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, the price of fertilizer have gone up more than 100%. Farmers are struggling to even buy fertilizers to apply to their land. And I think the news state of emergency declared says that there's going to be fertilizer available for smallholder farmers. Yes, giving fertilizer to farmers for free, it's a disruption in the market system, we know. But as an immediate and emergency response, we can do that. But in going forward, we must incentivize the system to handle that directly themselves. So there's a lot of things that I hear the government say, if it's implemented with a real goodwill and good intention, can help us address the serious food security that we have. For instance, insecurity as well. That's the biggest one. Farmers cannot even go to farm. They've been chased out of their farm because of insecurity in most part of the country. So government is saying that with this declaration, they will prioritize security that will make farmers go back and farm. All right. So we can farm and grow, we can feed ourselves.
Prof raised observations about the 8,000 naira per household and how feasible or sustainable, what kind of impact do you think that will have? Because if that's multiplied by who knows how many, that's a significant chunk. So if it's not going to address or attend to certain issues, why give it?
It's a very complicated situation. And this happened also in civilized or developed world. For instance, in the United States some time ago, the United States government from time to time decide to give some kind of incentive or palliatives to citizens just to cushion the effect. They cannot give enough money that will actually cushion the entire effect 100%, but they can at least do something in that direction. So at the act of giving 8,000, I know it's a little amount of money over a period of months, for smaller households. But you can imagine what 8,000 sometimes means to the smaller household that want to be able to afford and feed themselves. Today, most households can't even afford to buy bread because the cost of bread has gone up due to importation of wheat, and wheat has been scarce in terms of supply to the country. So 8,000, to an extent, at least a family can afford to at least look into the fact of even getting themselves bread into the house. The cost of noodles, the cost of fertilizers, which governments do. So it's not just a one-off saying government is giving only 8,000. There are other things that government must do to ensure that the entire ecosystem is incentivized and
like
we can take care of the voids.
Like what?
So, for instance, government has just removed subsidy from fuel. That immediately has made transportation costs to go up. But government is also saying that how do we resolve this in other areas? I think what we're just doing is just robbing Peter to pay Paul. We have taken subsidy out of fuel because we feel people that benefit from there are not at the bottom of the pyramid. And we're taking that to agriculture. Because when you start giving fertilizers to farmers, start giving incentives to farmers, you're also trying to subsidize that, which is nothing wrong about that. There have been advanced countries or civilized countries that also give subsidy to agriculture. In the US, for instance, they heavily subsidize agriculture. In fact, the meat and dairy sector get about 60-something% of that subsidy that they give to that particular sector. So government can also do other incentives like supporting farmers to get access to mechanization so they can produce more food, get security handled so we can go back to the farm and produce, ensure that we have input supplies to farmers that can produce and help us provide that space. Let's take care of the infrastructure. If the roads that goes to the rural areas and the farms can be fixed by government and supported, it will improve logistics cost, logistics of food or commodity from the farm to people, and it will reduce cost of that as well. So that will also eventually bring down the cost of food supply, and that will reduce how much we rely on importation.
So, Prof, yes, he's spoken about the subsidy component, and then that 8,000 naira as well. Yeah, it might be little, but who knows? It could have some impact. What recommendations would you have such that it could have the desired result that you anticipate or expect?
Thank you. You know, the issue of 8,000 is like treating the symptoms, not treating the disease. It's like somebody having headache that could be induced by any of the, disease conditions, maybe malaria, anything. And you've not gone to treat the causative, effect, the causative agent of what is causing the headache. You're just giving the person an analgesic. That's just what it means. So 8,000 will not be able to ameliorate issues. What are the issues people are struggling with? Increased food prices, increased mode of transportation system, and everything else. The houses have increased because the landlords will tell you that they need to do this and that and that, and they have also increased it. School fees have increased. So what do? People have to move from one place to the other. So in my own mind, I think the best thing that government wants to put, infrastructure in place. There must be public transport system that would help people to commute from one place to the other at a cheaper rate, discounted rate. That's what should be done in this case. Because you give somebody a household 8,000, out of this 8,000, they're still going to use it to travel. I mean, commute wherever they have to, go to the market, etc. It's really nothing. When you compare this, what they have to spend at the end of the day, it comes down to nothing. And my own is the households, even this 8,000 will not get to the people. It will not get to the people. So the government must, re-strategize, bring up, infrastructure, public transportation system, increase the salaries across board. Now, salaries must be increased across board.
Some people will say that what you're only looking at perhaps the cities, the urban areas, and of course, I mean, it would seem that it will be different strokes for different folks. So, what would affect those, for instance, staying in Abuja, and how the kind of subsidies they should receive will be different from, say, those in rural areas, in rural communities, largely agrarian communities, which the cities depend upon for food.
Exactly.
So you specialize mostly in food science and technology. Yeah. And food is one of the biggest areas where we have problems. We've struggled with food inflation now for the longest time, beg your pardon. Looking at what they're planning in terms of supporting the agrarian communities to ensure that there is food security, Do you think that we are on the right path in that regard?
Now, I haven't seen the full, project structure. But to my mind, for the agrarian society, there must be, money for seedling to the farmers. Because in the rural sector, it's a different story, like you rightly said. But they have to be given, monies or seedlings for the farming inputs, the fertilizer and all, at a very subsidized rate. Because they have to, and every other household should be encouraged, put up a small garden by your house. Because in that way, you don't have to buy everything in the market. You don't have to buy a vegetable. If you have a small garden in your house, you don't have to go and buy vegetable. Even if you don't have land, you can put it in potted plants and all that. You can improvise and all that. But the rural dwellers, their own need is not like what you have in the cities. The cities, the needs in the city is so much. And so I'm not saying that they're not going to focus on the rural, because their own demand is the farming inputs. And so the government must also make provisions for that.
Of course, they also need cash as well.
And they will need that's the cash for the cash for the inputs.
8,000 naira will certainly, will certainly make more impact in rural communities than, say, in the city. But I'm looking holistically at the general plan, because we know that Labour is still in discussions with the federal government over palliatives to cushion the effects. But we were still waiting for the outcome of their own discussion, even though somehow they still seem to be, they're not quite happy from what we see here in terms of what the federal government has rolled out. That's what the papers, the dailies, are reporting this morning. But more holistically, as a professor, dealing in the area of food, and I know that there are many, many different layers and different areas of food. Do you think that we currently have what it takes to, because people say, oh, leverage technology to make sure that we are able to get the best results in almost every aspect? What areas do you think we can leverage on technology to get the best outcomes to reduce food inflation?
Well, the area we need to focus mostly is on post-harvest, losses. Because surprisingly, maybe about 30% of all fresh produce produced in this country is lost due to poor management. We don't have post-harvest, management systems. By the time, let's say, you are moving, tomatoes, any of the perishables from the north to the south with the bad road, by the time it gets to the north, to the south, half of the basket is already gone because of the bad road. So what systems, what are the, transportation systems you need to put in place? If there were cargo trains, it will move very fast. If there were, government can put up, refrigerated warehouses for, for the farmers, and they use it in what? In a cooperative, and they pay for that. It might not even become, but government can give the incentive for private sector in investment into the cold store initiative warehouse, and then farmers can now be able to store their produce, be it yam, be it rice, because if in times of harvest you have so much. That's what we usually have in Nigeria. In times of harvest seasons, you have so much available. Food is cheap, but after that, food becomes expensive because most of them has spot along the way. If you buy so much, and the market woman buys, a lot of it is spoiled. I had a lot of, shocking revelation in Calabar. In the market, there's a fresh fruit market in the in one of the markets. If you go there, about half of the produce are lost. Why? Because we don't have a post-harvest market, systems for, preserving these fruits. So the government must, invest in those structures. That's the best way to go.
Isn't that where food science and technology can come in?
That's why food science, but you need to have, for you to have a cold storage warehouses, it needs a lot of capital because you need 24/7, lighting. Yeah, you need refrigerator system there. So individuals cannot do it, but government can incentivize, private sector to do it, and then it's not going to be free. So if a farmer knows that, if I can keep my let's say my produce here, and I know that eventually I will sell it. You don't need to sell it at a loss, because what happens is that after the harvest, they are in a hurry to sell so that they don't lose this produce. But if you have a place where your produce is assured of the quality, you're going to sell it gradual, and there will be a steady supply of food in the system for a long time. So that is a major problem we have in Nigeria.
Well, it's something worth asking Mr. Idris about, because one of the areas the federal government is looking at is a place whereby they can produce food all year round. They want to partner. They want the Ministry of Agriculture to be in synergy with the Ministry of Water Resources, so that there is irrigation, and then there will be constant production of food. But will it make any sense to keep producing food when it is that we're wasting a significant portion of the food that we're currently producing? Do you think the government is, has looked critically at the food value chain to see where exactly we can begin to save the day? This question is for Mr. Idris. You can hear us.
Thank you so much, Mark. I believe that there are two major areas that we must look into if we want to address this food security challenge that we face as a country. One part is about increasing production and productivity on one side. The other side is also reducing the wastages. There's the post-harvest loss that Prof just talked about. And I think in what I've read so far in some of the policy of the new administration is that, yes, they want us to ensure that we have Ministry of Water and Ministry of Agriculture work together. Why that is important, Mark, is that today we rely heavily on rain-fed agriculture. No country can feed and survive by just having seasonal agriculture where you only rely on rainfall before you can produce. We must increase our production. There is a need for us to embrace and promote more of irrigation so we can produce more food all year round. That also means a lot to the income of the farmers that's producing, because now they can do more than one cycle in a year. It means so much money to them. It means so much food coming back into the system.
Okay, I hope we get him back.
This was, for instance, some of our production system.
He's back. Okay, he's back now, I think. Please go on, Mr. Idris, we can hear you.
For instance, that we are. Okay, thank you, Mark. So I was saying that there are two ways: increasing production by supporting all year-round farming, which we can do by not relying heavily on only rain-fed agriculture. Now we can produce all year because farmers cannot have water to produce, as against waiting for only the rainy season to produce. And we're supporting a lot of young people today to use solar-powered irrigation system to get that done with smallholder farmers. Government can increase that. That's also an entry point for young people to be involved in agriculture. But on the other side as well, how do we also reduce the wastages? For instance, in the tomato value chain, 40 to 60% of tomato produce in this country is being lost to post-harvest losses as well. So now we can also harvest the power of solar to provide cold storage systems that are powered by solar, which is being done in some part of the country right now through some of our initiatives and other organizations as well in the country. Government can also increase on that particular strategy. So I think it's a holistic thing. It's not a one-size-fits-all problem that you can solve with just one solution. You're addressing productivity issue and production. You're also tackling wastages as well on the other side. At the same time, you're also looking at areas where there's no efficiency within the entire value chain and addressing all those voids within that system. Eventually, government should not even be involved in direct intervention like we're doing now. Just build the infrastructure and create the enabling environment, and let the actual market actors on the demand side, on the supply side, to work the way they should work within a functional market system. I think that's what we're going to get to at some point in this country. But for now, I think these are just immediate responses to pushing the effect. And like the president mentioned earlier, rural people feed people that are in the cities. Majority of our farmers are in the rural areas. 80% of them in rural areas get their income from one way or the other from agricultural services or agribusinesses. So it means a lot if we support agriculture, because that means so much income to them, and they can produce more food. They won't feed those of us that live outside the rural areas and the urban cities, in the urban areas as well.
Idris, let me stay with you for a little bit, if you can hear me. Excuse me. There is an aspect of this whole conversation, and I'm glad you talked about the rural areas now. There's an aspect that maybe the president's spokesperson's address didn't speak directly to, and that is the role that the locals have to play in securing themselves. Hitherto, we hardly heard of insecurity at the local government levels. Everyone seemed to watch out for everyone. Remember the son of whom you are kind of a scenario in everywhere where before anything goes wrong in any community, they ask, first of all, where's your house in this community, in this area, in this local government, in this particular street? Who are you? Everyone was able to watch out for each other, and as a result of that, they were able to stave off a lot of insecurity challenges. Now, in terms of food security, how do you see the locals themselves playing a role? Because we can both agree that the governments, whether federal, state, or local, can't think it all through. The people at the lowest rung of the ladder have their own responsibilities in this as well. So do you see a role for the locals? If you do, how do you see themselves also helping to protect whatever it is that they have, supported by the initiatives of the federal government, which we now hear has been scaled up to the level of the National Security Council?
Thank you so much. I believe strongly that, yes, the local could play a very big role because in the community, in rural community, most times everybody knows everyone. If you see something, you say something, and you can actually fish out the bad eggs within the community. But at times also, this local, you must understand that are also going through a lot of challenges and changes that's making, even changing and shaping behaviors. For instance, we talk a lot about the clash between the farmers and the herders. And most time we think it's just something that just occur because the herders might be just brutal people that want to take advantage of the farmers. But sincerely, it's also a big climate change impact issue. The herder needs water and grass for the animals to survive. The farmers is also trying to struggle to produce, to feed and sustain their own livelihood. So when due to climate change impact, there's been a shortage of grass or pasture and shortage of water heavily. So when there's no water and there's no food, a stable society will not have the pillar to stand on. These herders now start going through nomadic, moving from one location, looking for grass and looking for water. In that course, they engage with farmers that are actually growing the land and trying to make food happen. So if also we can support some of the climate smart agricultural solutions, climate smart livestock production.
Okay.
The president talked about building ranches. Can we support regenerative agriculture where
people Mr. Idris, while all of that is very, very laudable, taking on the people, educating them about their role is also something very significant. But we're running out of time. Let me ask you, Prof, very quickly in Abuja. A fellow prof like you, Professor Samuel Odeomi, who is a professor of transport and logistics at LASU, said, and I quote, "Many areas in Nigeria are in surplus of agricultural produce," and I think you also said the same thing the other time, "but they cannot get to town. Banditry and violence are disruptions to farming in Nigeria, which is why the report is calling for a supply chain system that is resilient and can withstand shocks." He wasn't the only one that said that at this particular forum where this was discussed. Supply chain system is a major issue to the issue you also raised the other time about post-harvest losses. How do we address that? Prof, it's for you.
Sorry? No, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, boy. Can you hear me now, Prof?
I couldn't hear.
Prof, can you hear me? Just confirm if you can hear me. The question is about supply chain systems. Can you hear me, Prof? Awesome. Oh, apologies. Well, let me ask you that same question, Mr. Idris. If you heard me, supply chain systems seems to be quite an issue because we lose a lot to that, not just about storage, but about the supply chain system. Well, how would you suggest that we go about it?
Supply chain system is a very critical thing that we must address if we want to also address the issue of food security. I would say that government needs to invest more in feeder roads connecting area of high production to area of high consumption. We know, for instance, in some major crops in Nigeria, they're heavily produced in the northern part of the country. but it's a big tax trying to move them from the northern part of the country to southern part, or where there's a huge market in this country. So I think engaging roads and also improving the logistics system. We cannot completely rely on just having trucks moving things. Government can look more into other alternative way of transporting goods, commodities, and from where they're being produced to point where they're being processed, or area where they're being consumed. Looking at the railway system, looking at the waterways, looking at other ways to improve on logistics of getting, and also hygienic part of even moving things as well. For instance, crops that require cold chains from end to end in this country get moved without cold chain. And that alone impact on the quantity of food that end up making it in good sense to the end point. And we lost a lot of them as well.
Closely related to the matter of supply chain is the price control mechanism, which is also incorporated in this declaration of state of emergency by the presidency. I wonder if this will address, the many challenges of transportation of food to the final destination. Are we assuming that it will take care of all those taxes, that food transporters and merchants have to pay, or there is a need for a fuller thinking in that regard? Mr. Idris, that would have to go to you if Professor Kweme can't hear me. Mr. Idris, that will be for you.
Okay, thank you. So I agree with you 100% that there's multiple taxation on the way, and also tariffs that you pay for moving foods from the farm to the market. And that's a huge problem as well, causing high cost of food. But I think the government has mentioned one thing clearly, that they're going to promote a lot of commodity boards, which will ensure that there's fair pricing in how much food and commodity are being sold in this country. And that will also ensure that the farmer is protected to get the fair share and the fair price required for what's being produced. But at the same time, government also streamline the method of also charging for the taxes or the levies or fees that you pay along the line to get to the market. And that will also reduce the cost of food as well. But again, the cost of transportation also is still high, except we can diversify that method and use cheaper and cleaner alternative to transport things from the farm and also to the market. Also, we address that particular issue as well. So I agree that we must streamline and reduce the cost that we pay from farm to market. And also commodity board will also help a lot. But again, productivity level is important. The cost of even production in this country is still high. And that's due to a lot of reasons that I can still share at some point again.
All right. Let me now come to you very quickly, Prof. The federal government also said through the special advisor on communications that they will purchase land to the tune of 500,000 hectares, which has already been mapped out. I wonder if this is something to chair. Does this settle that land issue, which is also always a back and forth as far as livestock is concerned, grazing is concerned? And what would be the role of the subnationals in this regard?
Well, as far as the land issue is concerned, that's a good step in the right direction. Affordability of land, accessibility of land is good. Then again, it all depends how the farmers are going to actually get this land without undue stress, without undue bottlenecks for them to access this land. And so I feel that the land issue is good, is a good step, but then the modalities of actually the farmers getting this land, there shouldn't be any bottleneck. The actual farmers should get it, not political farmers. Most times government means very well, but the implementation is wrong. And so we just wish and pray that actual farmers will get the land, and the inputs that will also go, not only the land, that the inputs, farming inputs, very subsidized farming inputs should be given alongside with the land.
Just one more thing. You talked about you not having seen the project structure. So could you give us a picture of a near ideal or an ideal project structure that should be applicable in this regard to make this work?
So one of the, because I could overhear, one of the speakers talking about the issue of supply chain and productivity, So we increase production. So we can't be going around the vicious circle of more production, more food waste, more production, more food waste. So the strategy should be that Okay, so we need to address the issue of food losses along the food chain. Where are these issues? What do we do? And the best thing you need to do is to set up these cold storage warehouses in all the local governments. Get the farmers to form, cooperative. I think most of the farmers have cluster, sectors. Get them to form. And then they get a private sector to manage that cold storage facility. And the farmers, and the other stakeholders, they will come to agree as a token that they will pay. So they pay monthly for their storage of their facilities. I think that is to the issue of, it will check the issue of food waste in fresh produce. But then the government must also sensitize other people who want to also turn the product into another end product, because the food manufacturers are having a big raw deal. I wonder how many indigenous food manufacturers are surviving because of high cost of diesel, because of high cost of raw material. So these are the things that government must give incentive to manufacturers. There must be waivers for them. There must be tax waivers for them. If you are going into food manufacturing, what are the waivers I have? What are the incentive I can, I can get from government to be able to cushion the effect that before I go into manufacturing?
All right, Professor Christine Ikweme, Department of Food Science and Technology, University of Calabar. We have also had Mr. Rufus Idris, who is the Country Director, Heifer International. Thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kimberly.